It used to be that getting into the 10 blue links at the top of Google could make or break your business. But here in 2025, that world is dead, and it's been replaced by something brand new that I think is equally exciting, probably even more exciting in this particular moment. And that is Generative Engine Optimization. It's sometimes also called Answer Engine Optimization, but we usually call it GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. And it is probably the most exciting thing to happen to the SEO world in a long time. Now, if you're an SEO, it's very important to be up to date on this, but also if you're a business owner, it's incredibly important. And we'll get into why that is in a lot more detail, as well as all the things you need to know to do it well. But I'll just start you with one statistic, which is from TechCrunch. And that is that in the year to July 2025, referrals from AI engines like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude increased 357% year over year. So a lot more people are using chatbots in order to do their research and find brands and find websites than they were before. And we'll get into more about why it's also very important to do GEO and to be optimized and have your website appear in these bots in a little bit. But I want to show you the basic pillars of generative engine optimization. So I'm a GEO speaker and writer and consultant. I do this for a bunch of different brands, and that's given me some insights into exactly how GEO works in this moment and the three things that I feel you need to focus on in order to get your website and your company and your brand ranking and discussed in a favorable way within the chatbots that people are using right now. And increasingly, again, almost 400% increase are using at the moment. So there's basically three pillars that you need to know about with GEO, and we'll go into each of those in a lot of detail. So the first pillar is technical issues. Things that you need to have on your website from a technical perspective in order for chatbots to be able to process it and to be able to basically decide what it is that you have on your site, whether it's something that they want to recommend or your brand is something that they want to recommend. And what I tell people is that they can't form an opinion of you and your brand if they can't see the stuff on your site. And that can be a huge issue, but there's also some other things that can make it harder for chatbots to read your website, and that can then prevent them from sharing useful information about your brand with potential customers. So one thing that you really should look at immediately, if you haven't done this already, is your robots.txt file. And if you're in the SEO space, you know that this is a file that is used, among many other things, to basically determine which pages of your site are accessible to the crawlers operated by search engines and now increasingly companies like OpenAI or Anthropic to feed data into their generative models. Now, the robots.txt file can allow these crawlers to visit a website. It can block certain pages or it can block them entirely. And one thing I've seen happen is in the early days of chatbots, a lot of experts said, hey, you should go out and block the crawlers from ChatGPT and other kinds of Perplexity, other kinds of chatbots, essentially. And the reason given for this was, hey, they're going to steal your content. They're going to take your content and use it for training and not really give anything back to you. And that's going to consume resources on your site, so why bother? Why not just block all these crawlers? And a lot of people went out and did exactly that. And that was a prudent choice at the time for many people. But the problem is that if you did that, maybe you sent an article like this one to your tech person and said, hey, do this, and then forgot that you did that, you might still be blocking those crawlers. And what that means is that you're actually depriving these chatbots of a vital source of information about you and your company that's now incredibly important for them to understand what you do and to effectively tell potential customers asking questions in something like a ChatGPT or a Claude about you and your brand. And so I've seen this happen where people blocked these crawlers thinking they were protecting their content, and they were, but now they've forgotten they've done it. And the chatbots can get around this in some ways. They can find other sources of information about you and your brand. But if you are still blocking the chatbots, now is the perfect time to think about unblocking them. This is, again, often a very simple change to the robots.txt file. So if you haven't checked it in a while, go and make sure you're not blocking the crawlers that you should be letting in. Maybe send this along to your tech person again and have them check that out for you. That's a big win. It's a quick win. It's an easy win if you can open up access more broadly to the crawlers that are feeding information into these chatbots. Another quick win is to set up Bing Webmaster Tools. Remember the search engine Bing? It has under a 10% market share. It's kind of known for being the creaky old search engine that is kind of an also ran aside from Google. But nowadays, the technology underlying Bing is actually being used by a lot of chatbots, including ChatGPT, to basically feed search data into the chatbot and help it understand websites and brands and that kind of thing. So ranking in Bing before would have maybe made you the butt of a joke within the SEO community, and now it's actually increasingly essential to basically be placed well and to be well regarded by these chatbots. So Bing has a free Webmaster Tools. It's very similar to Google's Search Console, but again, it's for Microsoft's Bing. And it's very easy to set this up and make sure that Bing can see all the pages on your site, to feed them sitemaps, to do all the kind of stuff that SEOs would recommend, and to hopefully increase your own visibility and certainly to monitor your visibility on the Bing search engine. So set that up if you haven't, dust it off if you set it up years ago and haven't gone in there in a while. Make sure that, again, Bing has good access because it is the feeder to a lot of these generative engines, whatever you want to call them, or chatbots when it comes to live search data. A couple more things you can do on the technical side. Make sure your site has clear navigation. Make sure that it loads quickly. A lot of these chatbots are crawling millions, billions of sites on a day-to-day basis, and they don't want to wait around. They don't want to consume resources waiting for your site to load. So if your site isn't snappy, then they might end up not crawling particular pages or crawling them less frequently. So a good place to start is to run a Google Site Speed Report and fix any glaring issues there. Make sure you've got clear navigation. Chatbots will follow the links on your homepage and will start to understand what the important pages on your site are. So it's very important to have a clear navigational structure. Another good one, a little bit deeper type of thing, is to use schema. So again, once you've got Webmaster Tools set up and also on Google Search Console, you can check and see if you've got good schema set up on your pages. This is essentially a way to put machine-readable information onto your website. Things like FAQ pages and that kind of stuff can be called out in schema, and that's something that can help the chatbot understand what's on the page. Again, it's really communicating with a machine instead of a human, and it's something that WordPress can do for you, and certainly if you have a developer, they can do that for you to have schema on some of your key pages. Make sure you've got alt text on images, and also make sure that you're not hiding content behind JavaScript, because usually these crawlers are not able to use JavaScript. So if your whole site is loaded in JavaScript, again, ask your tech person if you have no idea what I'm talking about, they might not be able to see what's on your site. So these are all good technical things to fix or to add if you want to improve your own site's GEO. The fact that, for example, Webmaster Tools' main landing page is not loading would not be good, for example, for them to be able to rank well in a chatbot or have a positive impression from a chatbot of that brand. Now, let's move on to the next pillar. And that is what I like to call kind of the narratives that you create, the stuff you write in your content on your site about you and your brand. So chatbots, amazingly, I think, really pay a lot of attention to what you say about yourself in deciding what to say to customers about your brand. And again, that's a little bit surprising because search engines long ago realized if you let brands tell their own story, they're gonna try to be manipulative and say that they're the best company in the world or their product is the best in the world. And so search engines really rely on things like links or time on site to determine if you're any good. But in my testing and in testing from other folks exploring this, they have found that chatbots behave differently. They're a lot more trusting of the things you say about yourself, and some would say maybe even a little bit gullible. So a fantastic and really funny example of this comes from the researcher Mark Riedel. He is an academic, and he embedded some text in his academic bio, basically saying that he was a time traveler. He's a time travel expert. And ChatGPT went along and crawled that and believed it and started telling people that he was a time travel expert and a time traveler. So this is kind of an extreme example. This was from a couple of years ago. But I found even in my own testing, even in 2025, oftentimes the chatbots are going to cite your own pages when talking about your brand. So you should have an About Us page that talks about you and what you do in a lot of detail. You should have a Our Story page that gives a linear narrative, because chatbots love that, with specific dates of how your company or your brand came to be. Again, that gives some context and background. It's very helpful to have on there. A team page where you're sharing bios of everybody involved, because again, the chatbot will often know about the people in your company and their own personal brands, and that can contribute legitimacy and just, again, help to provide that context. If you want to get advanced, you can include same as and other schema on there that helps the chatbot to tell who the person is. At the very least, you should link out to their social profiles so that the chatbot can disambiguate. My name is Thomas Smith, and the chatbot's going to have a hard time knowing that I'm somebody who writes and speaks about GEO and not, for example, a 17th century painter, because there's another very prominent 17th century painter by the name of Thomas Smith. So very important to break those things out. And these are pages you should probably have anyway, maybe even pages that customers would find useful. But chatbots, again, find them absolutely essential to understand you and what you do. You should also have an individual page about every service, every product you offer, going into a lot of detail and including FAQs about that product or service. What I found is that the chatbots will start generally when somebody asks a broad question by citing other sources. We'll get into what those are. But as people get further down the funnel and they're kind of starting to ask questions specifically about your brand, that's when the chatbots tend to switch and start to refer to information from you. And so if you put that information out there in a good format, it's clear, it's accurate, but it is positive about your brand, then you can start to influence the things that they tell users. To make sure you have those pages, again, kind of team pages, about pages, history of your company, and then individual pages for each of your products or services. Also very important to be consistent across all of those. Always refer to your company using the same name, your products and services using the same name, so that it's consistent and the chatbot has an easy time disambiguating. So that's the second pillar. And the third and final pillar of generative engine optimization is the stories or the narratives that others tell about you. So these are basically external sources of information that the chatbots will pull from in order to understand who you are and also whether you're legitimate. So there's a couple categories here. Some of them are kind of traditional press. So if you can get a story in trade publication or a national publication that mentions your brand, even if that story doesn't link to your site, that's valuable information that the chatbot will use to understand that you're legitimate. But interestingly, if we look at data from Pew Research, we find that some of the sites that these chatbots consider to be authoritative are not necessarily the ones you would expect. So Pew found that Wikipedia, YouTube, and Reddit get cited by chatbots more than any other sites. And this is particularly for Google's AI overviews, which is one of the places that people use AI, even if they don't know it, most often. And it's very important then to make sure that you don't have any kind of negative or inaccurate information on Reddit about your brand. If you have a Wikipedia page, make sure that it's accurate. If you don't have one, maybe ask somebody and ask an editor if your company is noteworthy enough to have one created. And certainly YouTube you can control directly by creating your own YouTube channel. Reddit, it's a little bit harder to be self-promotional there. People there hate it. But you can do things like an Ask Me Anything session. And this is sort of a way that brands can, if you're open to answering questions about your brand, be featured on Reddit and share authentic information that also helps to shape the story about your brand. So those are important places to think about, in addition to, again, just sort of the tenets of PR. Getting out there, getting mentioned in authoritative places that relate to your company. Directories are another very important one, a weirdly important one. Again, chatbots seem like maybe they're stuck in 2007 in terms of a lot of the ways that they process information. But if you can get featured in major directories for your industry, I've seen that that's, again, a kind of shockingly good way to get the chatbots to put you into their top 10 lists and that kind of thing. When a user says, hey, who's the best blank in blank, you might end up getting recommended if you can get featured in some of those directories. Social media is also important here. Again, we saw YouTube show up, but certainly having a presence on other social platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever's appropriate for your industry, and not having an embarrassingly low follower count. The final one I'll say here is that online reviews seem to factor into chatbots analyses as well. So if you're a restaurant, or even if you're a business, creating a Google business profile and then getting some reviews, asking customers that love you to please go on and write a review there, that can help to, again, establish legitimacy and encourage chatbots to mention you. All good things to improve your site's GEO. So those are the three pillars. Again, technical, and then kind of, I would call it content, the stuff you can create and control on your own site, and then what we would call brand or PR, the things that people are saying about you in other places that clue chatbots into what you do and who you are, and also the fact that you are legitimate. So the final thing I'll address here is why now? Why is this important? Why is this something that you should care about? And the first answer, again, is just going back to that rapid growth in AI referrals. This is something that's up almost 400%. It's something that's going to continue to increase in the future. And even if it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the overall referral traffic for you and your brand right now, it's very important to build for the future, and it's something that will continue to grow. It's also important to realize that you might not see all of the impact of having good generative engine optimization for your brand, because not every customer is going to click through and read stuff on your site in a way that they would have with a blog or something like that accessed from a traditional search engine. A lot of the time, customers might have a detailed conversation about your brand with a chatbot, make a buying decision, and then head on over to your website directly, purchase your product on Amazon if you're there, or walk into your business without you even knowing or being able to see that they had that conversation. So it's very important to make sure, again, with good generative engine optimization, that the chatbots are saying good or at least accurate things about you and your brand. The other thing to keep in mind is that more and more people are using these chatbots. So there's actually been a huge increase, about a doubling of usage between 2023 and 2025. So a huge increase there. And again, this is only going to keep going up over time. And there's a final and really fascinating reason why it's important to do this right now, even if you're thinking, oh, it's only going to be a handful of clicks. Is it really worth it? And that is the fact that chatbots think a bit like humans. Once they've made up their mind about something, it is apparently very challenging to get them to change it. And I've heard this directly from researchers at top tech firms. And it's also something that's been featured, for example, here in the New York Times. This is a reporter, Kevin Roos. He wrote a critical article about chatbots particularly, and they actually seem to essentially throw a hate on him for months, even years afterwards, to the point where people were asking questions about Kevin Roos, and bots were saying, I hate Kevin Roos, and going on diatribes about him because he had criticized essentially their friends. And it was very hard for him to essentially convince these chatbots that he wasn't a bad person and somebody out to get them. And he details this in this long story in the New York Times. But again, it's something that I have heard from researchers directly, that if you can't make a positive impression early on, if these chatbots see something negative about you and start to believe it, it can take a long time and a lot of effort to change their minds. And it can even basically take a new training round, a new model release, which only happens every probably year or two at this point. We saw the delay between GPT-4 and GPT-5 was endless. So if you kind of don't get into the chatbot's good graces, you might not be able to get there in the future. It might be a lot harder to do it. So the time to start building that basis, convincing them that you're a good brand, a good company, is right now. And again, by following those different tenets, those different pillars, it's something that you can do. And it's fun. It's a lot more fun than SEO because it is more holistic. You're looking at brand, you're looking at interactions with real customers, you're looking at content that you control, storytelling, narratives about your company matter a lot to chatbots because fundamentally, these are machines that are built to follow patterns around language. And if you can create a consistent pattern in human language across all the places that people talk about your brand and you talk about yourself, you can start to influence the stories and the things that chatbots tell to others. And as we've seen here, that can be incredibly lucrative and incredibly powerful. If you found this helpful, please do like and subscribe to learn way more about AI and also GEO here from me.